Let's get some analysis now. I'm joined by David Gazzard from DPG Advisory, a former Liberal advisor, and Ben Oquist, Executive Director of the Australia Institute, a former Greens advisor. Ben joins us from Perth today. David Gazzard, first to you, though, with the spot market resuming normal procedures as of the next 24, 48 hours, it looks like we are through the worst of the immediate crisis, David.
I think they're confident that there's enough capacity that's been restored into the market so that the system's not going to fall over. The one thing I've kind of reflected on over the last week or so is just how fragile the grid's become, and it made me think about the broader aspects of reform that Anthony Albanese mentioned in the campaign. And if you think of some of the challenges over the last 4 years have been, obviously in energy now, but health, where we've come under strain between the carve-up of powers between the federal government and the state government, but emergency services with floods and bushfires, and even housing, which is something that the Prime Minister is talking about in Hobart today. All of these areas have come under pressure where you have different levels of government, for whatever reason, making their own decisions, but ultimately needing the protection of the regulator in this case, or the federal government, but not wanting to give up power. So I think reform in these areas is long overdue, and we've been lucky that even though I wouldn't normally support the market being interrupted, we've had a regulator that stepped in and clearly waited until there's been a resumption of supply of power so it can function adequately.
Ben Oquist, I interviewed Chris Bowen, that full interview coming up in about 20 minutes from now on air, but he has a bit of optimism about at least the medium term that the government can get that transmission and storage capacity up to a sufficient level to get the enormous amount of renewables into the system that's coming online. Is that enough, though, in terms of dispatchable capacity to fill in for the problems we've had with coal, for example?
Yeah, I saw some of that interview that you played it a little bit earlier, and you're right, he's positive but we need to get a lot more storage into the system. We are confronting 10 years of inaction that hasn't built the storage. We are now facing essentially what is the Liberals' energy crisis. And the only way out of that is to build more storage, more transmission, more renewables, fix the market rules so we have a modern energy system. We don't have anywhere near enough storage. AMO says we need 45 gigawatts by 2050, and we're at less than a gigawatt at the moment, so much more is going to be built. And I think David's right. It does make you reflect upon overall what's happened in energy in Australia. And Ken Henry's intervention was very interesting this week. He put it this way: Australia has an abundance of almost every type of energy. Yet here we are in this Liberals' energy crisis because we've managed it so badly. We've got huge profits being made by largely foreign-owned multinational companies, yet Australian consumers and Australian manufacturers are copying it in the net. We've got an abundance of gas, we've had an abundance of resources, and it brings home to bear how badly Australia manages its resources. You can look at a country like Norway with a $1.3 trillion sovereign wealth fund, and yet in Australia we have huge profits going overseas and Australian consumers and manufacturers copying the neck. I think we need a much bigger look at how Australia manages its resources going forward. And with that, we can help fix the Liberals' energy crisis, but we need a lot more storage, we need a lot more transmission, we need a lot more renewables. The debate has flipped. We now know that the faster we get into renewables, the more reliable and cheaper our electricity will be.
David Gazzard, your reaction to that, as Ben called it?
Well,
the Liberal energy crisis.
The Liberal energy crisis. Look, I don't have a problem with foreign companies more generally. There's foreign companies in Australia operating effectively in a whole range of areas. I think what we've seen with profit taking is due to poor regulation that allows those companies to switch off or charge customers for certain types of power. So it rewards them for going for power that is less reliable. I mean, I just think this is, I mean, we do have plenty of energy in this country. We're sitting on more gas than Qatar, but we can't get it out of the ground. So the price has risen. So, you know, the big thing here has been in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Effectively, what Ben's arguing for is much more expensive power when we have very, very cheap power. And there is a
cheaper power with renewables.
Well, if you get there, but it takes a while to build that, and we're seeing that now. And we're seeing all sides as different technologies come on stream, moving to that area. But it takes time to do that. It takes huge amounts of time to just get environmental approvals to set up wind farms or to set up solar farms. It's not like this happens overnight. So I think it's been the tale of getting from a reliable grid to one where there's been a lot more precarious forms of energy that have come in, and regulation has allowed for companies to move to the more expensive sorts of power. So, I mean, don't forget the consumers here that are under pressure in all sorts of things, where their power price has risen dramatically over the last while.
I want to play a little bit of what Anthony Albanese said today. Let's have a listen to this, and I'll get the reaction from Ben and David. Have a look.
And what we need is a government that is less interested in a glib headline that lasts for 24 hours and puts in place proper policy mechanisms that deal with the real challenges. It's time that the indulgence of the 24-hour media and political cycle ended, and it ended on the 21st of May.
Ben, Oquist, we've heard leaders say this sort of thing before. Is it possible to try and slow things down in terms of the demands of the modern day political cycle?
Well, it is different, and leaders are more accountable on a daily basis than before. You need to do both. You need to communicate strongly, but you also need to fix things. He's right. And I liked another line of the Prime Minister today where he said, Angus Taylor talked a lot of nonsense and did nothing. And that is why we confront this Liberals' energy crisis, because not enough action was taken. David's right about it taking a longer time to bring in supply, but some things can be done more quickly, in particular the building of storage. The effort on the demand side, a demand response and storage can be done much more quickly than building out renewables. And so that's the urgent component that we need to do now. And if we do, we can flip the whole debate that we've been having, that if we rushed to renewables, it would lead to more expensive and unreliable electricity. Actually, the complete opposite is true. If we lean into storage, we lean into more transmission, we put in place those modern market rules, we'll have more reliable electricity. We're dependent upon coal and gas now, and look how unreliable and expensive it is. So
let's get David's reaction
that debate and we can move in.
David, if that is the case, then obviously you're talking cheaper energy, but there is that, we've still got that interim period. It's not here just yet.
Well, I mean, don't look at this in a parochial sense, and this is where Ben wants to take us, right, into just focusing on what's happened over the last few weeks. This is happening around the world. And if you look at where the nirvana states in Europe that he would sort of normally support, they've gone back to coal. Most of those places have nuclear energy that they're relying on, although some has been decommissioned, and their renewables have failed there. So they're switching back on to, they've kept their gas deals going with Russia because they absolutely have to have them, and they're taking coal-fired power from Poland. So it's not like Australia's alone in doing this in the world, and these are states where he would normally support their energy policies in a far more fulsome sense. So I don't think really the argument he has here stands up. Okay. To the news cycle, I've got some sympathy for Anthony Albanese there. I just think we've seen not just a disruption in politics, we've seen a disruption of the press, and you've got headlines that are written by Twitter. You've got journalists that are more interested in what's running on Twitter rather than the substantive issues, where leaders are forced to confront difficult policies that can't be answered in 15 seconds in a press conference. So I have some sympathy for him there.
David, Ben, thank you, gentlemen. See you next week.